I know it always seems like I'm a little bit late to the party, but as you know, I like to thoroughly test out a device before sharing my opinion. So today I'll be taking a look at the Fold 3 after a month of use and sharing why, although it's been a month, I could probably have shared a detailed opinion after just a few days. Bear with me on this one, and welcome back to another episode of STU'S Reviews. Now, I want to say straight away, I'm still not over the fact that this thing folds. Honest to God, it makes me smile every time I unfold it. I mean, I've said it before, but you need to hear it again because 300 times wasn't enough in the last episode. This thing folds. I still can't believe that technology like this exists, and I find it fascinating. But unfortunately, it feels like many other content creators have lost their enthusiasm for these devices and have forgotten the magic of them. Now, I want to make sure that you realise that they are wrong. A lot of these people have been spoilt beyond mention with the constant stream of technology that they forget what it means to hold something truly wondrous in your hand. And I think that folding devices are still rare enough to be in that category of technology. I wanted you to know that that magic for me is still there, and I wanted to say that if you've never seen or had a go with a folding phone, you need to make it your top priority to do so, because as soon as you do, you'll immediately start trying to work out how much money you can make on OnlyFans with niche content, 5,000 litres of fairy liquid and a paddling pool. Now, I've said my piece about folding devices. Let's get stuck in and take a look at the key additions to the Fold 3 over the previous generation. This is the Fold 3, and I've been just as excited to review this one as I did with the Fold 2 nearly a year ago. Aside from the internal spec increase, however, there's something rather unsettling. The form factor remains rather similar, which is a little surprising considering the huge changes Samsung have made in the past. The crease is still there, the size is pretty much identical, and although the camera setup has been slimmed down from the colossal structure on the previous gen, even the cameras are the same. It even sort of feels like the Fold 2. But that's not to say that nothing has changed, because there are some pretty noteworthy differences between the generations. Perhaps the biggest change, in my opinion, and possibly one that gets breezed over a lot, is the fact that the Fold 3 now has an Ipx8 rating. And it's actually the first folding device to have this rating as well. This is a massive step forward in durability and feasibility of the device as a daily driver. One of the biggest fears I hear from people who own a Fold or who have thought about buying a Fold is, what if I break it? And that fear is completely justified because we all remember the flimsiness of the first gen Fold. And these folding devices are not cheap in any way, shape or form. So the durability is one of the most important factors in people's decision to whether or not it can be feasible to have one as a daily driver. The Fold 2 made some massive headway in this area. However, with the new Ipx8 rating, this phone can now be submerged for a considerable amount of time in up to 1.5 meters of water, which means you get added durability on wet days and wet environments in the rain. Now, this is without a doubt going to help put people's minds at ease, and for me, it's one of the biggest changes that Samsung have made in making this a good choice of phone. Now, the next biggest change, possibly the most intriguing technology-wise, is the under-display camera. This tech is really innovative, and actually it's still quite new. It's a tech we've only seen in a handful of devices, and many of those have been concepts. So it's great to see a company like Samsung implement this on a wider scale in a major flagship device like the Fold. But just because it's innovative and the technology is forward-thinking, it doesn't mean it's good. The actual quality of the camera isn't the best. It's sufficient in the sense that it takes a picture, but it does leave a lot to be desired, and at only 4 megapixels, it really is a very basic camera. The question here is it worth having an uninterrupted display at the price of having that lower quality camera? Well, unfortunately, we can hardly call it uninterrupted. I mentioned in my unboxing that this is quite obvious when looking at it, and although I can't seem to find any concrete information on it anywhere, the large pixels covering the camera seemingly have a different refresh rate to the rest of the display, or at the very least it gives off some kind of odd visual effect which makes it kind of jump out from time to time, especially on solid colour backgrounds. For the most part though, if you're not directly looking at it, it does blend in pretty well. And I can also forgive it a little bit for being a pretty new type of technology. And the thing is, it's not so much of an issue that the camera is lower quality on the internal display, because the nature of the Fold being a folding phone means you can simply open it up and use the full rear camera setup as a selfie camera whilst using the viewer on the front display in its unfolded state. But hold the phone, why doesn't being able to use the rear set of higher quality cameras as a selfie camera get rid of the need for the internal camera on the larger display altogether? Honestly, the folding screen still has so many benefits, like it did in the previous one, and one of them is obviously vlogging like I'm doing right now. I'm using the wide angle that's on essentially the back of the phone, whilst being able to view what I'm looking at by using the folded out screen. It's just so useful. I think I'd rather have had no internal display camera and a truly seamless experience. I don't mind having to use the rear setup folded out for selfies, which, let's face it, you're likely going to do with this phone, because the rear camera system, although unchanged from the Fold 2, is still really good. Here are some images taken from the camera using the auto function, so there's been no post-processing at all, and you can see that it does a fantastic job of pretty much whatever you decide to throw at it. Macro shots, portrait shots, landscape shots. I'm overly impressed with how this does, and it's even good at video as well. It just does such a good job of whatever you ask to do, even using the Steadicam function, which makes the videos as smooth as butter, is fantastic. For a phone that doesn't have its sole focus on being a photography and video masterpiece, I believe that the Fold 3 does a significantly good job, and I really cannot sing its praises enough. Even here, where there's lots of darks, lots of highlights, it does a great job at adjusting itself to pick up the most detail it can. And even in things like macro shots, this thing is just insane. Now let's get back to the internal display to mention another change, which is that it's harder and less breakable than any previous generation Fold. The Fold 2 had a bit of a softer touch about it that I wasn't necessarily fond of, whereas the Fold 3 feels much nicer, and I would say is getting nearly indistinguishable to a regular glass screen. And with this increased hardness is Samsung's guarantee that it will withstand 2 million folding motions, something which is ridiculously unverifiable under regular use. According to a recent study, the average individual checks their phone nearly 115 times a day, or around once every 10 minutes. Now let's say that we unfolded the phone every single time we checked it. This means that I'll be in my 80s and probably in some care home rambling about the internet show I used to have. But anyway, testing this aside, the added durability also means that Samsung have been able to implement the ability to use the S Pen as well, which in my mind the Fold was always built for, so it's great to see that implemented, and it works a treat as well, meaning that I can draw my masterpieces when I'm out and about. The only issue I can see here, however, is the S Pen isn't built into the Fold like on the Note series, which means you will lose it. It's more of a question of when rather than if. However, I would bet a packet of crisps that with this new capability we will see a generational release of the Fold with the S Pen built into it somewhere down the line. Now there's a small change to the front display too. The Fold 2 had a 60Hz refresh rate on the front, whereas the 3 now has the same 120Hz on both the internal and front display, which is a welcome positive change, certainly for consistency. But talking about consistency, the Fold still has tons of optimization issues when flitting between the front and the unfolded display, like I mentioned in my Fold 2 review. Often you'll get messages pop up saying that the app needs to close and restart to be able to continue working on the internal display after using it on the front display, defeating the object, in my eyes, of a quick transition. Now that's not every app, some are optimised quite well, however there are two types here, those that seamlessly work and those that switch display but aren't optimised properly for the resolution change. For example, Twitter. And when you compare the same screen on both the front and the inside, bizarrely you can actually see more on the front-facing display because of the native resolution optimization. Now I am aware that there are workarounds for this, but I'm talking purely from a built-in capability. It's not the best of experiences, and it saddens me that we're still in the same position a year later. Now, okay, this isn't just Samsung's fault, and I recognise that, but it's annoying nonetheless that developers still haven't considered optimising for folding devices, especially now that nearly all major phone makers have a folding device of some sorts. But anyway, with the updated 120Hz display on the front as mentioned, this is kind of where the key changes stop, and the reason that I could probably have shared this opinion after just a few days of usage. This particular iteration feels more like an incremental evolutionary change rather than the revolution that the Fold 2 felt like. In the grand tally of everything on the Fold 3, there's not a lot of things on this device that Samsung have changed, which I guess is partly a good thing and partly a bad thing. It's a very incremental update that features tons of refinements, but is it enough? This phone, without a doubt, is a fantastic device, but I just wish that Samsung had done a little bit more on things like optimization of the software, perhaps even working with app developers directly, and I wish that they'd added a few other things that I mentioned from my Fold 2 review, such as a grippy texture to help open the phone, because it is a slippery kipper still. And talking about design, I'm starting to think that the person who picks the colours of these devices is actually colourblind, because this is supposed to be green, like the Mystic Bronze version from the Fold 2, which was actually pink. This follows suit in the sense that it's actually black, under most lighting anyway. And please, tell me, it's not just me, do you think that this is black or green? Am I colourblind, or is the person that made this colourblind? Let me know in the comments below what you think, because a lot of you resoundingly agreed with me that the Mystic Bronze of the Fold 2 was absolutely pink. So, is this absolutely black? Or grey at the very, very best. Now, okay, it might seem like I'm being a bit of a negative Susan about some of the features of the Fold 3, but I think my critical points come from my expectations, and potentially the expectations that Samsung set with the revolutionary changes between the first and second generation of Fold. If I put those expectations to one side, I think that the truth is that this is exactly what the Fold lineup needed, a refinement of their technology to make it more attractive and feasible as an option of a daily driver. Not to mention the price drop compared to the last one at a few £100 cheaper, making it way more attractive. It's still rather expensive for the everyman at nearly £1,600 for the base model, but Samsung are moving at least in the right direction, and the fact that they've managed to keep all of the incredible features that I loved about the Fold 2, improving it in many of the ways that I'd hoped, and making it cheaper, it's sincerely hard not to like the Fold 3. Yes, there's a few little bits that I'm not too keen on, and still, yes, some of the changes that they've made might seem a little pointless, but in summary, this is possibly the best folding device that money can buy right now, and quite simply, it's a damn good phone. And that concludes my thoughts on the new Fold 3 after a month of use. If you enjoyed today's episode and want to see more, don't forget to hit that thumbs up, subscribe and notification bell. And remember, please let me know in the comments if I'm going mad. Is this really green or is it actually black? And I'll see you back for another episode of STU'S Reviews soon.